As all members have received a copy of the call for tonight's meeting, the reading of the call will be omitted. Will everyone please rise and join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. As all members have received a copy of the minutes of our May budget meeting, the reading of those minutes will be omitted. Doug Wells, who has a correction to the minutes.
Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen, on page 25 of 26 of the minutes of last month, there is a motion that says Douglas Wells, Chairman of the Legislative and Rules Committee, on behalf of the committee, made a motion. It wasn't on behalf of the committee. It was a motion that I did on my own, so it shouldn't be on behalf of the committee. That phrase should be stricken.
Okay, and it was seconded.
Yes.
All right, thank you. All right, we also have a correction to the list of those absent in the draft from District 10. Anjum Patel was listed as being absent but was present, and we will make that correction. Are there any other proposed changes to the draft minutes? Hearing none and absent objection, the minutes as amended stand adopted upon unanimous consent. Susan Fahey, Chair of District 11.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator and fellow RTM members. We're here tonight to honor one of our fellow District 11 members who passed away on December 30th, 2015, Arthur Bruce Dixon, or as we knew him, Bruce. Bruce was born on June 9th, 1943. He was raised in Wilton, Connecticut, and attended Wilton Public Schools, where he graduated high school in 1961. After high school, he joined the Air Force, serving our country proudly from 1962 to 1966. He was an engineering mechanic from the 100th Maintenance Squadron. After the Air Force, Bruce began his career working for a private surveyor in Wilton. From 1974 to 78, Bruce worked for the town of Westport as an engineering assistant, where he often served as chairman on projects investigating complaints or inspecting projects for the town's Public Works Department. In 1978, Bruce began working for the town of Greenwich as the traffic operations supervisor, where he wore many hats, including representing the town at state-level meetings many times. The highlight of those years was when Bruce was asked by our first selectman, as well as the state of Connecticut, to oversee the reworking of all traffic for the I-95 corridor during the collapse of the Mianus River Bridge. Beginning in 1994, he became a zoning inspector for the town of Greenwich, providing detailed and extensive technical information to the public regarding issues involving regulations and Board of Appeals. A favorite story from his years on the Planning and Zoning Board, as shared by his wife, was that one day a wealthy woman came in and asked about a building permit for a pool. He explained to her that because of the water shortage, she would not be able to fill her pool that year. She asked Bruce what other people in town were doing about this. He said they were buying bottled water, such as Evian, and filling it themselves. Let's just say he kept a poker face as his wife, and the lady believed him. Bruce retired from our town service in 2005 at the age of 62. In his personal life, he married Carol Palasko in 1996 at the age of 53. Carol, who works for the health department of the town of Greenwich, asked him why he had never married before, and he explained to her calmly, no one had ever asked him. Bruce also had a photographic memory of the roads and resorts from here to Canada. He was often called by others the tour guide of the Eastern Seaboard. I actually knew this to be true. When I first joined the RTM, knowing no one, this strange man at the beginning of a meeting one day handed me a thick envelope. I had no idea what was inside, and being somewhat cynical and new to the RTM, and I being a newcomer, I thought maybe it was a payoff for some sort of vote. When I opened it, it was a brochure for a place to stay in Lake George with my family, and this followed with many other envelopes with restaurant menus or other resorts along the main shoreline. People who knew Bruce well said he would often take a ride up to New Hampshire just to grab a hot dog at his favorite place and then drive back down. During his life, he was a kind and philanthropic man. He donated his time at the Westport EMT, where he was often known as playing the role of patient. He was the house captain for the AmeriCare's Home Front project, where each year in May he would lead the work on a new home in the state of Connecticut. He also was the past president of the Greenwich Municipal Employees Association, where he met his wife. He was involved with the Pacific House Homeless Shelter in Stamford, where he and his wife prepares meals on a monthly basis, and usually at Christmas he joined others as dressing up as Santa and playing. So for the men at the shelter. Bruce was an active volunteer with several youth groups and yearly took trips to New York City or Virginia, where he would sleep on a bunk in a hostel for a week at a time. Bruce is survived by his loving wife, Carol, his stepdaughter, Diana, and his sister, Dorothy Sullivan of Wilton, with 7 nieces and nephews. We are thankful for Bruce's many contributions of time and talent to our community. Mr. Moderator, we ask that this tribute to Bruce Arthur Dixon be included in the minutes of tonight, an official copy be sent to his family. Thank you.
Will the members please rise and join in a moment of silence in memory of Bruce Dixon? Thank you. Steve Warzoa, District 9.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator, fellow RTM members, town officials, and guests. Thank you for allowing me to speak to you tonight on behalf of the Greenwich Independence Day Celebration Committee about a wonderful tradition here in town. For the past 12 years, we as a town have gathered together every July 4th to celebrate the founding of our country and the important role Greenwich and its residents played during the Revolutionary War. As always, we will honor the descendants of Greenwich's early families and pay tribute to our own patriots who fought and died so that we are able to enjoy the freedoms we have today. The Greenwich Boys and Girls Club Honor Guard will raise the first American flag, and the Greenwich Council Boy Scouts of America will present the flags of the original 13 colonies. The Boy Scouts will then be joined by the Girl Scouts to recite 6 excerpts from the Declaration of Independence. This year's event will take on even greater meaning as we remember and honor Greenwich's own patriot, Sarah Bush, in her role during that time of our nation and Greenwich's history. Sarah Bush herself will be presenting a first-person narrative of life during those times and about being a strong, independent, and fierce woman in a time of war. While remembering the leaders of Greenwich's past, we will also honor the leaders of our future as we present and recognize the Good Citizen Awards to the young people from Greenwich's public and private schools. The event will begin with the traditional firing of a cannon, and we will also have a 21-gun salute. We are honored again to have the Sound Beach Community Band play a selection of patriotic songs, along with our mistress of song, Stephanie Keys. This year, we will be welcoming our new Master of Ceremonies, our very own member of District 1, Ed Didakis. Please join us Monday, July 4th at the Greenwich Town Hall at 9 a.m., rain or shine, for a truly Greenwich form of celebration. Immediately after the ceremony, there will be refreshments served in the Town Hall lobby. Please make sure to go to Facebook and like our page. It's called Annual Independence Day Celebration, Greenwich CT. Please feel free to post pictures from not only the ceremony and the many firework displays in town, as well as posting pictures of you, your family, friends, and neighbors to show everyone how Greenwich and its residents celebrate our independence and honor our nation. The district chair should be passing out flyers, and there will be more at the table outside the auditorium. If you would like additional copies or copy in electronic format, please feel free to email and call me. Again, thank you, Mr. Moderator, for your time, and we look forward to seeing many of you on July 4th. God bless America.
Thank you. Karen Foss-Leotis, District 7.
Well, I get to do something fun tonight. I get to introduce you all to a young man here who was accepted into the U.S. Air Force Academy and will be representing Greenwich and the state of Connecticut. District 7 has the pleasure to recognize a member of our district who who will be leaving our town to accept his commission and to attend Basic Cadet Training, or BCT, at the U.S. Air Force Academy. Once he completes BCT, he will be enrolled in the Air Force Academy class of 2020. George is the youngest of 4 children. He graduated with honors from Fairfield Prep, where he served as junior year class president and class secretary, and is a member of the National Honor Society. He has actively participated in the Greenwich Boy Scouts. He is a candidate for the Boy Scout Eagle Award and is the recipient of the Order of the Arrow, a Boy Scout group that accepts those scouts who live the closest to the oath and law. George actually stood before the RTM this past year as a delegate to Boys State. An avid runner, he has competed in cross-country, indoor and outdoor track, and was the 2015 SCC West champion in the 1600 meter and was All-State in the 3000 steeplechase. In his United States Air Force Academy application, George stated the following, attributed in part to the late President John F. Kennedy. I can imagine no more rewarding a career than having the opportunity to serve in my nation's armed forces so that I too may serve the exhausted, the impoverished, and the strife-afflicted of the world. It is with great pleasure that District 7 recognizes George H. Christ, who upon completion of BCT will be a member of the United States Air Force Academy class of 2020. The district, on behalf of the RTM, wishes him Godspeed and safe flying as he represents the state of Connecticut and the town of Greenwich. District 7 further moves that these comments be included in the minutes of the meeting so that future generations may know of his service to our state and to our town. Thank you.
Now, if I had been thinking fast enough, I would have invited him to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. And as my daughter would say, beat Air Force.
Hey, I'm in Air Force.
All right. Mr. Eddy, are you waiting to address? Okay. All right, that brings us to the call for tonight's meeting. Mr. Eddy, by the way, I'm going to stick with the original plan here. It was a little more complicated. So I have notified the district and committee chairs that based upon the reports received, I will recommend that we put nothing on the consent calendar tonight, that we combine for voting purposes items 1, 5, 9, 10, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 18, that we consider separately items 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 11, 12, 17, 19, and 20, item 21 having been withdrawn. And I anticipate motions to postpone items 17, 19, and 20. So, at this point, is there a motion to suspend the rules to combine items 1, 5, 9, 10, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 18 for voting purposes? It has been moved and seconded to suspend the rules and combine items 1, 5, 9, 10, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 18 for voting purposes. The motion to suspend the rules is not debatable and requires a 2/3 majority to pass. All those in favor of suspending the rules and combining those items, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion has carried. All right, so we will begin with the combined calendar items. Item number 1 was postponed from our April meeting. This is a resolution to appoint as a regular member of the Inland Wetlands and Watercourses One-Word Agency for a term expiring March 31, 2020, Jacob Schondorf. That item is now before us. May we have the reports of the committees that considered it? Mr. Eddy, do you want to start us off? John Eddy, Chair of our Appointments Committee. To be followed by our
Good
Land
evening,
Use
Mr. Moderator, fellow members. This is another case where I was hoping Peter would precede me, but the Appointments Committee took up the nomination and appointment of Jacob Schondorf. Mr. Schondorf is a consultant and civil engineer who has served actively as an alternate member of the Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Agency since 2013. He was a member of the Building Committee for the Hamilton Avenue School, and he is nominated to be a regular member, succeeding Mr. James Carr, who had served since 2010. The interview with Mr. Schondorf was positive, but not really eventful. The Appointments Committee recommended 11-0-0 with District 9 absent to appoint Mr. Schondorf.
Thank you. Peter Berg, Chair of our Land Use Committee.
Evening, Mr. Moderator, fellow members. The Land Use Committee interviewed Jay Schondorf last Monday evening. Mr. Schondorf has, as Mr. Eddy explained, is a civil engineer. He's been serving as an alternate on the Inland Wetlands Watercourses Agency for the past 2 years. I won't repeat what Mr. Eddy just told you. We discussed wetlands in general and the fact that wetlands is a soil type. It doesn't necessarily mean that you see any wet land. So the only way you can know if you've got wetlands is if you have soil tested, but you should know that now the Wetlands Agency does inform buyers of properties in Greenwich whether they do have wetlands on their property. There were no objections to Mr. Schondorf. Our vote was 10-0-0. Districts 4 and 5 were absent.
Thank you. Discussion on item 1. Item 5 now comes before us. May we have the resolution on item 5? Peter Tessie, our first selectman.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen of the RTM. Resolved pursuant to State Public Act Number 95-268, an act concerning neighborhood assistance, the programs and complete applications filed in the town clerk's office are hereby approved for the purpose of encouraging business contributions to nonprofit organizations and government agencies providing important services in Greenwich. It's the same as appears on the call.
Thank you. Will a member please move the adoption of the resolution? Resolution on item 5 has been moved and seconded. Alexis Vulgaris, Chair of our Health and Human Services Committee.
Good evening. Princess Urfey, the Director of the Community Development Office, met with Health and Human Services last Tuesday to present this item. The Connecticut Neighborhood Assistance Act is an item that comes before the RTM each year. It's a program that provides tax credits for businesses that contribute to community programs that have received both municipal and state approval. Municipalities interested in submitting programs for inclusion in the Neighborhood Assistance Act must hold public hearings, and then the legislative body of each municipality must vote to approve the programs, which is what we're effectively doing this evening. After the tax-exempt organization receives both municipal and state approval for its programs proposed, it's then up to the organization to secure funding from businesses, and those businesses will receive the tax credit from the state. July 1st is the deadline for the town to submit all applications completed by the not-for-profit agencies to the State Department of Revenue Services, which is why we take up this item each June. This year, 5 not-for-profits in Greenwich have submitted requests for contributions totaling about $850,000. Again, it's up to the organizations requesting the funding from the approved programs to secure and solicit those donations directly. So it does not cost Greenwich anything to support this initiative. Our vote was 12-0-0. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael Warner, Chair of our Finance Committee.
Good evening, fellow members. We also had Princess Urfey with us. We took up this item last Monday. I can only echo everything that we heard Alexis say. Our vote on this was 12-0-0. It was a no-brainer. Thank you.
Thank you. Discussion on item 5. Item 9 now comes before us. John Toner, our selectman.
Mr. Moderator, members of the RTM and guests, resolved that the following named person nominated by the Board of Selectmen be appointed a regular member of the Board of Health for a term expiring 3/31/20, Mark Armstrong.
Thank you. Will a member please move the adoption of the resolution? Resolution on item 9 has been moved and seconded. Alexis Vulgaris with the report of our Health and Human Services Committee.
Hi, good evening. Dr. Armstrong is a board-certified radiologist who's practiced in the New York area for about 30 years. He became aware of the opportunity to potentially join the Board of Health after he had a conversation with Caroline Baisley, who's the Director of Health, and she had encouraged him to submit his name for consideration. Dr. Armstrong stated that while he has not yet attended a board meeting, he has reviewed the meeting archives, which have provided him with an understanding of some of the issues that the board has faced. He stated that his interest in joining the board does not stem from having an agenda or one particular issue that he's interested in forwarding, and he believes that this is an asset because he can look clearly, objectively, and independently at issues as they arise. Two potential issues that Dr. Armstrong did mention during his interview of interest were herbicide and pesticide use, as well as the Zika virus. And this is something that came up with all of the candidates that we interviewed for the Board of Health, because you can imagine it's somewhat complex, right? Like, you want to control Zika, potentially, but in order to do that, you might have to use herbicides and pesticides, and what's the role of the Board of Health in that problem. Our vote was 12-0-0 in favor of Dr. Armstrong. Thank you.
Thank you. John Eddy, Chair of our Appointments Committee.
Thank you. I don't have anything to add to Ms. Vulgaris's report. The Appointments Committee vote was 10-0-1 with District 2 absent. The abstention by the representative from District 6 reflected his concern that while the nominee had an impressive professional background, he did not see how radiology related to the Board of Health.
Discussion on item 9. Item 10 now comes before us. John Toner, Selectman.
Resolved that the following named person nominated by the Board of Selectmen be appointed a regular member of the Board of Health for a term expiring 3/31/20. Vic Santow.
Will a member please move the adoption of the resolution? Resolution on item 10 has been moved and seconded. Alexis Vulgaris, once again, with the Health and Human Services report.
Good evening. Mr. Sandhu is a lawyer, and his interest in serving on the Board of Health stems from the fact that both his parents and his wife are doctors, and so he's been surrounded all of his life by individuals who believe in public health policy and committing themselves to, supporting good public health policy. He also sees serving on the board as an opportunity to give back to his community. The current chairman of the Board of Health, who is an attorney, has expressed that he would like to see more attorneys join the board because in the past, some of the most active issues that the board has faced has dealt with ordinance enforcement. So he feels that or ordinance interpretation. And so he felt that having another lawyer on the board could only be beneficial. Issues that Mr. Sandhu expressed an interest in were Lyme disease and, again, the Zika pesticide herbicide issue that I had mentioned previously with Dr. Armstrong. He has attended a Board of Health meeting, and he's also studied the meeting archives. Our vote was 12-0-0 in support of this nomination.
Thank you. John Eddy with the Appointments Committee report.
The Appointments Committee voted 11-0-0 with District 2 absent to recommend appointing Mr. Sandhu.
Discussion on item 10. Item 13 now comes before us. Selectman John Toner.
Resolved that the following named person nominated by the Board of Selectmen be appointed an alternate member of the Planning and Zoning Board of Appeals for a term expiring 3/31/20. John L. Vecchiola.
Thank you. Will a member please move the adoption of the resolution? Resolution on item 13 has been moved and seconded. Peter Berg with the Land Use Committee report.
Good evening again. So we interviewed John Vecchiola at our meeting last Monday. He is being nominated to be an alternate member of the Planning and Zoning Board of Appeals. Mr. Vecchiola has been an attorney in town for 45 years. He has appeared several times before the Zoning Board of Appeals on behalf of clients. He is very conversant in the board's procedures. So we discussed what is hardship. That's often an issue on a case before the Zoning Board of Appeals. He explained that hardship cannot be an economic hardship, like you need to put an extra room on the house because you just had your 5th child. That's not considered a hardship under the term. That's a hardship, but that's not a valid hardship for the Zoning Board of Appeals. We asked if a lot of neighbors showed up, does that influence the decision? And he said it does influence them, but that ultimately the job of a member of the board is to uphold the law. He is very eager to participate in the process, and he has served in many different roles in town. So many of us know John Vecchiola. Our vote was 10-0-0. Again, districts 4 and 5 were absent.
Thank you. Mr. Eddy with the Appointments Committee report.
Again, Mr. Berg summarized adequately with nothing for me to add. The Appointments Committee report was, vote was 11-0-0 to appoint Mr. Vecchiola. District 2 is absent.
Discussion on item 13. Item 14 now comes before us. John Toner.
Mr. Moderator, I have a substitute resolution. Resolved that the following named person nominated by the Board of Selectmen be appointed an alternate member of the Planning and Zoning Board of Appeals for a term expiring 3/31/20, Frank O'Connor.
Thank you. Will the member please move the adoption of the substitute resolution? Substitute resolution on item 14 has been moved and seconded. Peter Berg with our Land Use Committee report.
Thank you. So like Mr. Vecchiola that we just heard about, Mr. O'Connor is a new appointment to the Planning and Zoning Board of Appeals as an alternate. Mr. O'Connor has held a variety of jobs in the financial services industry. He's very enthusiastic about serving on this board. He was recommended to the board by the current chairman, David Weisbrod, who he also knows from his financial services and banking career. And he has become familiar with the workings of the ZBA. He personally went before them in 2011 with his own property and has attended a number of meetings subsequently. He highly articulate, gave a strong message that he wanted to give back to the town of Greenwich. Our vote was 10-0-0. Once again, districts 4 and 5 were absent.
Thank you. Mr. Eddy with the Appointments Committee report.
The Appointments Committee vote on Mr. O'Connor was 11-0-0 with District 2 absent.
Thank you. Discussion on item 14. Item 15 now comes before us. John Toner.
Resolved that the following named person nominated by the Board of Selectmen be appointed a member of the Commission on Aging for a term expiring 3/31/19, Stephen Katz.
Thank you. Will the member please move the adoption of the resolution? Resolution on item 15 has been moved and seconded. Alexis Vulgaris.
Good evening. So Mr. Katz is a current member of the Commission on Aging. Professionally, Mr. Katz is the president of Sterling Care, which is a full-service home health agency in Greenwich. As a member of the Commission on Aging, he's interested in seeing Greenwich become even more of what he defines or calls an age-friendly community. Examples of things that communities can do to become more age-friendly are creating volunteer opportunities for older adults, which promotes socialization, keeps individuals mentally active, and generates an elderly workforce. Install longer traffic lights with sounds for older adults attempting to cross the street, as well as ensuring sidewalks have wide enough curb cuts to accommodate wheelchairs. He also pointed out that the last two things, the longer traffic lights with sounds and having wider curb cuts, helps everyone, especially parents pushing kids in strollers. Mr. Katz also praised the ability of the Commission on Aging for their recent outreach services with some of their memory programs, specifically a program that they have called Super Noggin. And Super Noggin is a digitally based program that allows older individuals to engage in memory brain games to sharpen their mental acuity. And one of the things the Commission has done is taken their Super Noggin show on the road, so they're able to bring the program to individuals who might not be able to make it to the senior center. And the example he gave was residents of Parsonage Cottage, so that those individuals can be more involved in brain games and keeping their memory strong. Our vote was 12-0-0 to renominate Mr. Katz.
Thank you. John Eddy with the Appointments Committee report.
In addition to the items that Ms. Vulgaris mentioned, the conversation with the Appointments Committee also focused on Mr. Cott's suggestion that the town consolidate its fragmented existing services and doing activities in different venues within the community in order to collect the attention of more of the seniors. He suggested collaborating with the Department of Health and the Department of Social Services and Parks and Recreation in order to make, again, what he called an age-friendly community. He also suggested that zoning regulations for assisted living facilities would be helpful for the Planning and Zoning Board to take a look at, as the town could either take a laissez-faire approach to its development with respect to our aging population or be proactive. The Appointments Committee vote was 10-0-1 with District 2 absent, and the abstention from District 11 was out of concern that the plans for the Commission on Aging to coordinate services for the senior population in town have been long-standing but without effective results. Thank you.
Thank you. Discussion on item 15. Item 16 now comes before us. Mr. Toner.
Resolved that the following named person nominated by the Board of Selectmen be appointed a member of the Board of Social Services for a term expiring 3/31/18. Jeffrey Medina.
Thank you. Will the member please move the adoption of the resolution? Resolution on item 16 has been moved and seconded. Alexis Vulgaris with that report.
Good evening. Mr. Medina is very excited about the possibility of working on the Board of Social Services and the opportunity that this presents to work with programs serving Greenwich youth, which is a particular area of interest of his. While his professional background is in the area of financial services, he states that he's always enjoyed helping people. He had a conversation with Lauren Rabin, who used to be on the board before she jumped over to the Board of Ed, and it was through this conversation that he was encouraged to submit his name for consideration. Previously, he had worked at an after-school program at the YMCA for 3 years, and he believes that one of the disadvantages of the current board is that it lacks youthful volunteers, and he's hoping to change that. So Mr. Medina, is interested in acting as a liaison with some of the external entity organizations that focus on teens and drug addiction, and our vote was 12-0-0.
Thank you. Mr. Eddy with the Appointments Committee report.
Mr. Medina does appear to be one of those people who was just cut out and born to work in the area of social services. He showed a great deal of excitement about this to the Appointments Committee. The Appointment Committee vote was 10-0-0 with Districts 2 and 10 absent.
Thank you. Discussion on item 16. Item 18 now comes before us, the final of the combined calendar items. Mr. Toner.
Resolved that the following named person nominated by the Board of Selectmen be appointed a member of the Nathaniel Witherell Board for a term expiring 3/31/19. Richard W. Kaplan.
Thank you. Will the member please move the adoption of the resolution? The resolution on item 18 has been moved and seconded. Alexis Vulgaris with that report.
Good evening. We had a joint meeting with the Appointments Committee as they were unable to meet with Mr. Kaplan during their regular scheduled meeting, so they jumped in with us. Larry Simon, chairman of the Board of Witherell, introduced Mr. Kaplan to our committee, explaining that Mr. Kaplan's expertise in provider partnering, network building, product implementation, and post-acute care account management are all skills that the Witherell Board could benefit from. Mr. Kaplan has a 40-year professional career in insurance and managed care. He has held senior leadership positions at numerous healthcare companies, including Cigna, where he was in charge of operations for the entire East Coast. More recently, he's served as a co-founder of several healthcare companies that he's taken public. He has a broad understanding of the shifting nursing home and managed care landscape, especially as it relates to reimbursements and the ability to run a nursing home that is able to survive and thrive in the increasingly competitive market. He talked in detail about the Medicaid reimbursement rates that went into effect April 1st of 2016, and how those new rates and regulations have the potential to dramatically alter the rehabilitation services providing at nursing homes. So you can imagine that our two committees were very curious about what he had to say, given that we have just invested a tremendous amount of money in Project Renew. Mr. Kaplan stated that recently Medicare has decided to change how they reimburse for procedures such as joint replacement, which is a large part of Witherell's business in their rehabilitation unit. So Medicare is moving towards a fixed cost reimbursement system. And within that fixed cost per medical intervention. So they would reimburse at a fixed rate for, let's say, a knee replacement or a hip replacement. And the way that would be done is the hospital would be given that predetermined fixed amount, and then they would have to allocate portions of that amount to the various people that are providing the service. So the surgeon, they would have to pay themselves, the hospital for providing the hospital stay and the operating room and everything. And then they would also have to allocate money towards nursing homes. Naturally, there's some incentives for saving money, and those incentives can subsequently be passed along to the physicians. So Mr. Kaplan stated from the hospital's point of view, the best way to save money would be to eliminate the nursing home component of rehabilitation altogether, meaning that a patient would have joint replacement, receive 7 to 10 days of inpatient hospital care, which would be their rehab, then get discharged to home with outpatient rehab services. Mr. Kaplan stated that the next 18 to 24 months is a critical window for nursing homes to see how they adapt to this new policy change. So we had lots of questions for him. One of the questions that was asked is, what is a possible solution to this change? And he stated, first and foremost, that there is still a place for nursing homes in the continuum of care. And that secondly, he believes the nursing homes of the future will look more like a community hospital and that they will need to accept much sicker patients. And one example that he provided was that patients who are currently awaiting like a heart transplant and are on some very sophisticated heart-lung machine that keeps them going until they can get their transplant, would then transition to nursing home care as an alternative to staying in the hospital waiting for that transplant. Mr. Kaplan was then asked by a member of the appointments committee what the optimal nursing home looked like, and he identified 4 characteristics that he believes would help lead to success. The first was the facility should be between 200 and 300 beds, so a manageable size. The second was that it should be a mix of clinically complex patients along with rehab patients. The third was that you need solid metrics and technology to back up those metrics. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And the fourth was a balanced payer source as well as a variety of admission sources. So you want to have multiple hospitals that you're drawing from, Stanford Hospital, Norwalk Hospital, hospitals in New York, Greenwich Hospital, not just one. Mr. Simon then offered that Witherall also has 2 advantages. The first is that it's one of only a handful of 5-star facilities in the area, so it's a desirable facility for people who are going to need rehabilitation care. And the second is that it's located in Greenwich, which is appealing to families. Again, Mr. Kaplan stated that the next 18 to 24 months will be critical time to evaluate how nursing homes respond to the new Medicare regulations, and our vote was 12-0-0 in favor of his nomination. Thank you.
Thank you. John Eddy with the Appointments Committee report.
As Ms. Vulgaris said, the Appointments Committee met with the Health and Human Services Committee, and the vote was 10-0-1 with District 2 absent. The abstention from District 9, with District 2 absent. The abstention from District 9 was in response to the representatives' feelings that the town should not be in the nursing home business. Thank you.
Thank you. Discussion on item 18. That brings us to the end of the combined calendar items. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards? Combined calendar items 1, 5, 9, 10, 13 through 16, and 18, and proceed to poll your delegation. While we are voting, we will continue. We now begin with the separate items, the first being item number 2. May we have the resolution on that item? I would say your name, but I know I'd mispronounce it.
Hi, good evening. My name is Jim Rickey.
Ricky, thank you.
This is a substitute resolution resolved that the Town of Greenwich Board of Education accept a grant for $13,080 from the Asia Society for Confucius Classroom, which provides assistance in identifying and developing a partnership with a school in China organized by the Asia Society. Said amount being hereby appropriated to the following: $12,080 teaching supplies, $1,000 travel expenses.
Thank you. Will the member please move the adoption of the resolution? Resolution on item 2 has been moved and seconded. Josh Brown, Chair of our Education Committee.
Mr. Moderator, fellow members and guests, just a clarification, Mr. Rickey, the amendment was the name of the organization?
Correct.
Correct, thank you. Your Education Committee met last Monday, the 6th, with all districts present to take up this item. We had Alice Wan, a Chinese program teacher from the high school, who helped us understand this. This is our 6th year receiving the grant from the Asia Society Confucius Network. Since the first award, the participation in the program has grown to 110 students, and next year they're projecting 129. And so it's a growing organization or area of study. The request is for the acceptance of a grant that provides for the reimbursement of certain educational costs, as well as some expenses to have instructors travel to China and learn to add to the classroom dynamic. There are 2 teachers in the high school currently, and we understand the program is also now being extended into the middle school, so it's continuing to grow and evolve. After discussion, the Education Committee voted 12-0-0 in favor of this item.
Thank you. Discussion on item 2. Item 3 now comes before us. May we have the resolution on that item? John Eddy? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, thank you. I got in. We were on a roll with the combined calendar items. All right. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards, item number 2, and proceed to poll your delegation. All right. John Eddy, Chair of our Appointments Committee, with item 3.
Resolved that the following named person nominated by the Appointments Committee be appointed a member of the Flood and Erosion Control Board for a term expiring 3/31/2020. Aubrey Mead, Jr.
Thank you. That being offered on behalf of one of our committees, it does not require a second. Mr. Eddy, are you going to begin?
Yes, but just before I start, Mr. Moderator, on item 16, I said that the Appointments Committee vote was 10-0-0 with District 2 and District 10 absent. I made a mistake. It was actually 11-0-0 with District 2 absent, just for the record. Dora was there. Okay, so, with respect to the nomination of Mr. Mead, I'm going to give a little bit of a background on the Flood and Erosion Control Board, as the Appointments Committee did nominate to this position, and as we look ahead, the Appointments Committee is scheduled to nominate another member to the Flood and Erosion Control Board this year, 2 regulars members next year, and an alternate member next year. So I wanted the RTM just to have a little bit of background on this board. Unlike the vast majority of the other boards in town, on which those serving are nominated by the Board of Selectmen and appointed by the RTM, the members of the Flood and Erosion Control Board are both appointed and nominated by the RTM. And the following is a summary of the authority assigned to the Flood and Erosion Control Board by the town charter. The Flood and Erosion Control Board is given the authority to plan, construct, maintain, supervise, and manage a flood or erosion control system. They have the authority to purchase or condemn property which it determines is necessary for use in connection with that system. And it has the authority to negotiate, cooperate, and enter into agreements with the United States and the state of Connecticut, or the state of Connecticut, in order to satisfy the conditions opposed by the United States or the state of Connecticut in authorizing any system for the improvement of navigation of any harbor or river and for protection of property against damage by flood or erosion. There are also questions with respect to whether the Flood and Erosion Control Board is granted additional powers outlined in the general statutes of the state of Connecticut when it enters into certain agreements with the state and the federal governments. These may include bonding and assessing. And the reason I bring this up is that the Flood and Erosion Control Board has quite a bit of authority and responsibility appointed to it. But another thing that's unique about it is that with respect to carrying out this authority, it does not have a self-representative standing in the budgeting process. The Flood and Erosion Control Board does not directly receive the funding associated with exercising its authority and implementing its priorities. Although its closest relative in the organizational chart of the town's body is the RTM, which both nominates and appoints it, it has been historically dependent upon the cooperation of the Department of Public Works. It currently enjoys a good relationship with the Department of Public Works, but this was not always the case since its establishment in 1957. So again, I think that information is important with what's coming up and in light of the conversation that Mr. Mead had with the Appointments Committee. The Appointments Committee did vote to renominate Mr. Aubrey Mead to the position of regular member of Flood and Erosion Control Board. He has served on the Flood and Erosion Control Board as a regular member since 1988, and he currently serves as vice chair. Discussion preceding the interview with Mr. Mead centered on the unique status of the Flood and Erosion Control Board, which I just mentioned. And Mr. Mead presented a history of his tenure on the board, explaining how he has seen it evolve from being an agency restrained in its ability to perform given its isolation within the town governmental structure, to serving as an advisory board for the Department of Public Works without advocacy from any other town body, to developing a relationship with the current Department of Public Works administration that has resulted in the funding and performance of a townwide study of the existing floodwater management infrastructure, which allowed the Flood and Erosion Control Board to identify the key projects that and the funding that are required to complete them. This was mostly in 2006, 2007, after the severe floods that different parts of the town experienced. The prioritizing of those projects to address the needs and safety of persons and property, and finally, in the last year, to see funding committed to begin the undertaking of some of these prioritized projects. Of these projects, the 10 identified as crucial to town safety are slated to be funded, if not completed, in the next 7 years. Mr. Mead credited the cooperation of the Department of Public Works, and particularly its director, for the recent progress made on project funding and for planning for the completion of these projects. A large portion of the time with Mr. Mead was also spent in his response to a question that he was asked about the cost of addressing the in excess of $200 million price tag that the items identified in the townwide study listed. This is a recurring question and a source of criticism of the board for not pursuing all of the projects on the list. He explained that while the scope of the study was to obtain comprehensive understanding of the state of the town's stormwater infrastructure, not all of the problems which were identified in the study were urgent or in need of redress. Whereas the report did identify over $200 million in potential projects, the board identified approximately $40 million in projects that are prioritized as affecting the safety of both residents and property. Mr. Mead cited an example of a project identified in the study to replace an undersized storm pipe on Tomac Road in Old Greenwich, which was given a cost of $6 million. He related that there had been no complaints from residents about flooding in this section of town served by that pipe, and that while it's important to know about the substandard size of the pipe, the board could not find justification for immediately requesting appropriations. And he described it as an example of the type of project that, in the opinion of the board, did not merit immediate attention and might best be addressed should either a tangible problem begin to appear or should the DPW find itself addressing a highway or other issue in the area that might allow two birds to be killed with one tax dollar. The Appointments Committee vote was 10-1-0 with District 9 abstaining. The no vote was cast by the representative from District 6, who expressed the position that the candidate and the Flood and Erosion Control Board should be more aggressive in both seeking funding for its priority projects and in regularly evaluating and prioritizing what projects are necessary, given the expectation that the town will be affected by more frequent and powerful storms. Thank you.
Peter Berg with the Land Use Committee report.
Thank you. Well, that was an excellent report, and I can't add very much. So, Mr. Aubrey Mead, as Mr. Eddy said, has been on this board for nearly 30 years. He is a civil engineer, and he did explain that whole project ranking process that has identified about 10 projects that are public safety related. And he said 2 of them have actually now been implemented. That's a dam on Strickland Brook and erosion control project in Pemberwick. A third project, which is flooding near the high school, that actually causes the post road to be closed. That project is is going to be taken up by the state of Connecticut because Route 1 is a state road. We talked about tree removal and how that leads to flooding in Binning Park. Mr. Mead is very, very knowledgeable, very capable. Our vote on Mr. Mead was 10-0-0, districts 4 and 5 absent.
Thank you. Arlene Lamazzo, Chair of our Public Works Committee.
I thank both John Eddy and Peter for all that wonderful detail. I'll try not to repeat any of it. Mr. Mead came to our meeting with Ed Schmeltz, who is the chairman of the Flood and Erosion Control Board. In the past, since they were formed in 1957 as part of the Clean Water Act, I've lived in town that long, well, almost that long, and had occasion to call the Flood and Erosion Control Board. And what I discovered, and what I think they would agree is true, they were very inactive. They didn't meet regularly. If you called to discuss something, they'd say yes, yes, but nothing would happen. Since Sandy, of course, everything has changed, as was mentioned. Now they meet regularly. They hold public meetings. Of course, they work with DPW hand in hand, and I won't repeat everything that was said. Some of the projects they mentioned, which of the 10 projects they identified as high priority, 3 of them are already in the works or have been completed. Since 2011, they completed a project that involved a dam. They did a erosion remediation project in Pemberwick. And now, of course, the Church Street stormwater drain replacements, which is not just Church Street, but involves Mason Street, the Post Road, Sherwood Place, and it's an extensive 3-year project. So that's a very major accomplishment that they have promoted. They work with the Army Corps of Engineers on the Byram River project. This project is designed to protect the homes along that river who have been flooded. Tentatively, there's no structural improvement being thought about, but what they call non-structural. The study is not quite complete, but they expect federal funds that would provide 55% of the cost of solution, and the town would provide what they call in-kind costs. The study is going to go from the Byron River, beginning at Catalanos, upriver all the way to the Bailiwick Bridge. And over time, they expect to make those bridges that cross the Byron River higher so that it won't impede, the current bridges won't impede the flow, downwater flow. I won't go into the ranking, it was explained. We did sort of digress, because we had a subcommittee on the Public Works consisting of Don Hamilton, Candace Garthwaite, Irv Porter, and Don DeChapel, who were studying the project that's being proposed at 345.
This is a report on Aubrey Mead, right?
I understand that, but this is relevant. It's relevant because all of that pipe work there that goes to the sewer treatment plant has a tremendous impact on what the sewer treatment plant and the pipes can hold. So I won't go into the details, but know that we are very concerned about that, and there are some very serious issues with regard to the existing pipes. Our vote was 8 in favor, 3 opposed, and 9 absent. The no votes did not have to do with Mr. Mead, but had to do with the function of the Flood and Erosion Control Board. Thank you.
Thank you. Discussion on item 3. All right, will the district chairs please mark your voting cards, item number 3, and proceed to poll your delegation. I have the results of the vote on the combined items. Those were items 1, 5, 9, 10, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 18. Those in favor, 179, opposed 0, abstaining 0. I have the result of the vote on item 2. This is the grant to the Board of Education. Those in favor, 180. Opposed, 0. Abstaining, 0. That item is carried. I do just want to make the following comment. We don't have, I don't expect to be here long tonight, but we'll see. I'm just wondering if we are using our consent calendar properly. You see there were no negative votes at all, and I'm wondering why some of these combined items, I know we don't put new nominees on the consent calendar, but we had several nominees who were not new. And I'm just wondering why we're not using our consent calendar. And I try and give effect to districts who recommend that we organize the calendar a certain way. But I hope all the district members are in agreement that this is what you want, that you don't want to use the consent calendar for items that apparently have no opposition, and I don't know, we had no discussion. So I just ask the members to talk about this at their district meetings, and if this is what the members want, that's fine. I'm just, based on the votes, I'm a little surprised. All right, the next, Mr. Von Keyserling.
Just to respond to that, I take your point. If we're lucky, we should go with it. But I think the reason that we had originally setting up this way with the new appointment was to give an opportunity for that debate to happen, rather than having.
No, I'm not talking about new appointment. I'm talking, that actually the reason was to introduce the new individuals to the community. So, and that's fine, but I'm talking about like Steve Katz. Why was he, there are several members. And Mr. Von Keyserling, I never get a report from District 8, so this really doesn't involve you. I appreciate it. I do recognize when I encourage the districts to report that this could be the result. We're not going to get a consensus among 12 districts, and that's fine. But I think some would challenge the accuracy of that statement. And that was the rarely part. All right. Item number 4 now comes before us. Jim Rickey, Managing Director of Operations of the Board of Education.
Good evening. This is item number 4. Resolved that the sum of $120,000 be, and the same is hereby appropriated to be added to the food services account number S670-53400, known as food supplies.
Thank you. Will the member please move the adoption of the resolution? The resolution on item 4 has been moved and seconded. Josh Brown with the report of our Education Committee.
Mr. Moderator, fellow members and guests, the Education Committee met last Monday with all districts present and voting. We had Mr. Rickey, the Managing Director of Operations. We had John Hopkins, who's the Director of Food Services, along with the Board of Ed Chair Laura Erickson, the Vice Chair Barbara O'Neill, and the Secretary Debbie Applebaum. This request is for an additional appropriation to purchase food to complete this fiscal year. In April, management concluded that they would run out of funds in the appropriation line, that they immediately submitted a request for supplemental funding, which is now before us. It was explained that the costs are higher than expected due to different food offerings and the additional restrictions on the type of foods that can be offered. Much of our discussion related to the program itself. It has historically been able to cover costs of serving and actually was able to use some surplus funds to purchase various capital items and do other improvements. However, in 2006, the Board of Estimate and Taxation shifted costs for their benefits and health insurance to be covered by the fund itself. That amounted to $575,000 a year at that point. Management responded to that challenge by adjusting its staffing levels, by looking at efficiencies in order to live within their means. For nearly 8 years, the school fund absorbed many of these costs, but started taking on a deficit. So why come for the appropriation now in June? Due to the usual process, this item appears to us appropriately now. It was identified in April. The Board of Ed took it up and voted in favor of it in April. It came to the Board of Estimate and Taxation in May, where it was taken up and properly voted on, and this is the next meeting after that. Questions that we've received about taking funds from other funding sources. Remember that this is a unique fund, so it stands by itself. You can't dab or go into other funds in order to cover shortfalls. So after a lengthy discussion, the Education Committee voted for this item, 11 in favor, 1 opposed, 0 abstaining. The 1 opposed felt that the Board of Ed should be able to deal with the shortage of funds along with the BET. The discussion continued, and the Education Committee took up a sense of the Education Committee that requested that the Board of Ed further look into the option of privatizing the food service to obtain a real comparison of costs and services and to report back to the Education Committee prior to the May budget. Members that were present from the Board of Ed and from its administration expressed support for the idea, felt that having a member of the RTM's Education Committee participating in a reformed committee to look at the food service made good sense and was interesting. Our committee is interested in participating in that discussion and look forward to that opportunity. The vote on that sense of the committee resolution was 12 in favor, 0 opposed, 0 abstaining. So in conclusion, the Education Committee supports this item, 11-1-0.
Thank you. Michael Warner, Chair of our Finance Committee.
Good evening. The Finance Committee took this up Monday, and frankly, we had some difficulty getting our arms around understanding how the arithmetic worked with this fund, and we finally did. It should be said that this is a revolving fund, just like the golf course. It's a income, you generate your income and you have profit and loss. And we had an excellent review of where the lunch program has been and where it is going over the last 15 years. We had with us a large cast of characters. Most importantly, we had John Hopkins with us, who manages the fund and could give us a history of what happened over the last 10 years. The food service made money for a long time until a couple of fundamental things happened. One was the enrollment in the schools declined fractionally, maybe 2 or 3% over time, over 10 years. The regulations on what they could serve were gradually and somewhat severely restricted. They could no longer serve drinks with sugar. Fundamentally, they're restricted to water, coffee, and tea, and even Gatorade. They're having difficulty. They must serve food with no additional salt. They can't. They must serve whole grains. And guess what happened? Not only do they wind up with a menu, which you might see at the Shawshank Redemption movie. The students, at least in the high school, vote with their feet. Chicken Joe's profits started going up over time. So this is something that, in my opinion, having in another life managed cafeterias for a corporation, it appears to me that the food service management is all over this problem. They know exactly what's happened over time. And we finally, in understanding this, as Josh Brown has just well explained, they've been incurring losses over the last 10 years because of these, because of the regulations they must comply with. Also, this year, there was a big hit they took. They had to start paying for employee benefit plans, and that was a big chunk. But most importantly, what's happened here is in this profit and loss environment, they've been losing money, and guess what? The lower grades, who have been also subject to these restrictions, with good management, the lower grades, the kids who are gradually coming up, the corner is slowly being turned. They're losing, last year they lost about $450,000. And this year, for the first time in 10 years, they're going to lose less, maybe 60K less. And it's a turning of a corner, and I think it's largely because of just careful management. And what's happening is when you sell more stuff, you need to buy more stuff, and this is a request to buy what they need to finish out the year. After a lot of back and forth, we all learned a lot on the Finance Committee. We supported this item fully with a vote of 12-0-0. Thank you.
Thank you. Discussion on item 3. Mr. Solari? Why don't you come forward so everyone can hear? Thank you. Item 4. Why don't you just wait till you arrive?
Sure. Sorry. Just a question as to what exactly it would mean if the RTM were to vote no on item number 4. Practically speaking, does that mean that the children are not fed, as I've been told by a number of different individuals? Does it mean that the town gets stuck in a legal situation because it violates a section of the town charter and appropriation about appropriated funds?
All right, let's get an answer to that.
Thank you.
Is there anyone who can answer that? Mr. Minarski, our town controller.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Good evening. If hypothetically the RTM did not approve the additional appropriation of $120,000, and hypothetically the Board of Education exceeded the appropriation that's on the books for $1,340,000, it would generate a management letter comment from the auditors, formerly known as McGladrey, and it would be reported to the Office of Policy and Management. And the town would be on record to respond to the management letter and would have to come up with a plan to relieve the previous year deficit of $680,000 in the current year and proceed forward.
Thank you. Further discussion on item 4. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards? Item number 4, and proceed to poll your delegation. I have the result of the vote on item 3. This was the appointment of Aubrey Mead to the Flood and Erosion Control Board. Those in favor, 171. Opposed, 4. Abstaining, 2. That item is carried. All right. Item number 6 now comes before us. Mr. Didakis, for what purpose do you rise?
Mr. Moderator, I rise to make a motion that all future committee reports be limited to 3 minutes.
All right, heard a second. All right. It has been moved and seconded to limit all further committee reports for the balance of the meeting, correct, Mr. Didakis? To 3 minutes per report. Motion to limit debate is not debatable and requires a 2/3 majority to pass. All those in favor of limiting committee reports for the balance of the meeting to 3 minutes, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No. That motion is carried. All right. Mr. Branyan?
Good evening. Item 6, I have a substitute resolution. There's a correction on the first whereas. The new language for the first whereas reads, whereas the representative town meeting at a meeting held on June 11, 2007, authorized the first selectman to accept a grant from the state of Connecticut for the renovation and reconstruction of the Bruce Museum, and subsequently from time to time accept additional grants not to exceed $5 million. The rest of the resolution stands as presented.
Thank you. Will a member please move the adoption of the substitute resolution on item 6? Substitute resolution on item 6 has been moved and seconded. Josh Brown with the report of our Education Committee.
Mr. Moderator, fellow members and guests, the Education Committee met on Monday, June 5th. We had the town administrator, Mr. Branyan, also the Bruce Museum's executive director, Peter Sutton, the associate director of development, Stephanie Leo, and Daniel Kespa, who is the science curator, helping us to understand this item. It is requesting an authorization for the first selectman to accept a grant to be then transferred over to the Bruce Museum, so the town is kind of a conduit for this funding. The grant was applied for and accepted way back in 2006, as you just heard. Soon after the recession was upon us and the Bruce Museum decided not to proceed with the building project that they had originally intended to start. They've been renewing the grant periodically through the term, so they didn't lose that opportunity to get the grant or use it in subsequent years. They're now ready to put some of those funds to good use. The Bruce will take on the responsibility for fulfilling the reporting and compliance requirements, one of which is included as part of number 7 item on the call tonight, and that is really focusing on the existence, long-term viability and approach of the organization. The project is to refurbish the exhibits with an expected cost of $810,000. This grant of $750,000 will fund the majority. The remaining $60,000 will come from the Bruce's own funds. Over 20,000 students visit the Bruce every year. This in the last year was a record, they say. They'll be enhanced to have a more interactive elements, be more aligned with the school's science programs, and therefore a benefit for all. The exhibits were last touched back in 1992, which is quite some time ago. Mr. Brannian explained that the funds will be transferred over to the Bruce. The $60,000 of additional money is in the pockets of the Bruce, and they'll be able to allocate that on their own. It does not have to come to the town. Our vote on this item was 12-0-0 with our thanks and support for the Bruce Museum.
Thank you. Michael Warner with the report of our Finance Committee.
The Finance Committee took this up Monday night. I won't repeat what Josh just said, except to say that in one of the, as you have in your package, any losses that may incurred are going to be the responsibility of the Bruce Museum. And the Finance Committee fully supported this grant with a vote of 12-0-0.
Thank you. Discussion on item 6. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards? Item number 6, substitute resolution, and proceed to poll your delegation. Item 7 now comes before us. Ben Brannian, Town Administrator.
Good evening. Item 7 is as presented, no changes.
All right. This is an approval of the management agreement between the Bruce Museum and the town.
An extension of.
Will a member please move the adoption of the resolution?
So moved.
The resolution on item 7 has been moved and seconded. Mr. Brown with the report of our Education Committee.
Mr. Moderator, fellow members and guests, the Education Committee took up this item with all districts present and voting this past Monday. We had Mr. Brannian, we had Mr. Sutton, Ms. Leah, and Mr. Sepka there also helping with this item. It is seeking to amend the current management agreement between the town and the Bruce Museum. The land, building, and collection is the town's property, and the operation is done by the Bruce Museum. The real change is an extension in this agreement for 15 years with a one-time renewal of another 10 years, so a 25-year extension for this in all. This is needed, or was explained that this is needed to help demonstrate to the state under its grant program that the recipient of that fund will be around for a long time and able to serve the mission. Coincidentally, the agreement is coming to fruition in the next year, so timing is good. Questions were asked about other plans for expanding the facility, which we understand there may be some discussions or thoughts around. Mr. Sutton did acknowledge that, but that something was in the works, but was unwilling to comment further on what the nature of that project might look like, but was clearly telling us that it will come before this body for its review and expected support. So our vote on this item was 12-0-0 with our thanks and appreciation again to the Bruce.
All right. Doug Wells, Chair of our Legislative and Rules Committee.
Legislative and Rules took this item up last Monday evening. Districts 8 and 10 were absent. I won't repeat what the previous speaker indicated in this item and also in item 6 regarding the grant. Our committee heard from Attorney Jean McLaughlin from the Law Department, as well as Executive Director Peter Sutton of the Bruce Museum. Attorney McLaughlin explained that the town and the Bruce have decided to put forth the amendment, that is the First Amendment to the Bruce Museum Management Agreement, separate and apart from further amendments that will occur in the future when more extensive renovations of the museum takes place. That renovation, later renovation, will require a new look at the underlying management agreement and will require further revision to it. The Bruce is in the process of obtaining private donations in order to pay for the later renovation. Our committee focused its inquiry on the item 7 attachment, that is the First Amendment to Bruce Museum Management Agreement, a separate explanatory document submitted with the call. There were no real objections or concerns about the document except as to paragraph 6, which provides for an extension of the underlying management agreement for 15 years with an additional extension of 10. Having in mind the RTM's reluctance to provide long-term commitment for town-owned property where the town does not collect any revenue, we asked Mr. Sutton to explain why the Bruce should have a commitment that, per this paragraph, would last until 2042. Mr. Sutton explained that explained why BMI should have such a commitment. That is that it has been an excellent steward for the museum, whereas at one time the town contributed 45% of the museum's budget. That number is now down to 11% of their budget. The Bruce has, according to Mr. Sutton, become a nationally recognized museum as a result of their efforts, and has acquired valuable art that is essentially now owned by the town. He went on to say that it is important to have a long-term management agreement so as to provide potential donors with certainty that their donation will be made to a stable organization that will provide an excellent setting for their donations. Our District 6 representative then moved to delete the provision that provided for an automatic extension of 10 years.
30 seconds.
Which would have resulted in a 15-year term. That motion failed. We then took up a motion that was designed to provide for a full 25-year term, and at the appropriate time, all will make that motion. Our motion as revised was 10-0-0.
Thank you. Karen Fosley-Otis, District 7.
District 7 took up the item 7 on the call. And as stated in the call, the Bruce Museum is seeking a First Amendment to the management agreement, and we're offering an amendment that would limit the term to 10 years. District 7 offers the following amendment, and I guess it's the appropriate time to offer it.
Let's take the Legislative and Rules motion first.
Thank you.
Doug Wells, Chair of our Legislative and Rules Committee.
Our motion was proposed by our delegate from District 12, which deleted that part of the second sentence that begins with the management and ending with the word sentence.
What page are we on now?
It is on page 3 of the management agreement that's in the explanatory documents, paragraph 6. So the amendment is as follows. The second word is terms with a capital T. We changed that to term in the singular, not capitalized, so as to clarify that a term refers to duration as opposed to the provisions of the management agreement. And then in the second line, the words and the numbers 15 were changed to 25. And then we deleted the period at the end of that sentence, deleted the phrase that says the management agreement down to sentence, so that the paragraph as amended would read, the term of the management agreement shall be extended for an additional 25 years commencing on January 31, 2017, comma, provided that BMI is in compliance with all of its material obligations hereunder. Our vote on this was 7 in favor, 3 opposed, Districts 8 and 10 absent. The votes in opposition said that the RTM, if passing this revision, was setting a bad precedent by providing any institution with a long-term commitment for no direct financial benefit to the town. Those in favor thought BMI is a unique institution that has done an excellent job in improving the museum and deserves to be able to go to its donors with a certainty of stewardship. We then took, and our vote as revised was 10-0-0.
Thank you. All right, that is a motion to amend offered on behalf of one of our committees, so it does not require a second and is now before us. Does everyone understand what that motion is? All right. Okay. If you turn to the document that was included with the call, it's marked item number 7, First Amendment to Bruce Museum Management Agreement. On page 3, paragraph 6, the first proposed change is to take the word terms, the second word in that paragraph, and delete the S and make the T lowercase. So it will read, the term of the management agreement shall be extended, and then change 15 to 25. And following the date, January 31, 2017, delete the period, insert a comma, then delete the rest of that line, the next 2 lines, and the 3 words on the following line, immediately preceding sentence. So that's to be deleted under this proposed motion. So the first sentence, paragraph 6 will now consist of 1 sentence, and it will read as follows. The term of the management agreement shall be extended for an additional 25 years, commencing on January 31, 2017, provided that BMI is in compliance with all of its material obligations hereunder. Mr. Wells, is that correct?
Yes.
All right, does everyone understand what is now before us? Yes. All right, discussion on the Legislative and Rules Committee motion to amend the Bruce Museum Agreement. John Dolan, District 7.
So you've had 30 seconds to kind of chew on a fundamental change in the way the town is going to lease property, extending from 10 years with renewals to 25 years. I ask you, regardless of your thought of the Bruce Museum, every organization that stands up before you asking for something will argue that they are special in some regard. Is this how you want to go about making a decision on something so important? I would strongly encourage you to abide by the findings of the lease committee over a few years ago and vote no on this amendment. Thank you.
Well, this was passed at your committee and was reported at the districts, correct? Mr. Wells?
Yes.
All right, so I don't think it's 30 seconds. Further discussion on the Legislative and Rules Committee motion to amend. Mr. Von Keyserling, District 8.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen, guests. And hopefully they will spring into summer now and I'll have to go through this more. I'm a little pained. There's one of Chris's rules that there's no corporate memory in this town past 2 years. And it seems to come up pretty true all the time. I seem to remember a committee that went on for 9 months on a boat club lease. And there was a real fuss about 10 years extension. And we spent 9 months fussing about this and whether there's going to be enough slips and this and that, and all kinds of things that had really nothing to do with the lease particularly, but it was a good ground to get into to debate a lot of other issues. 9 months we went in. I think the RTM dealt with it for over a year. And the RTM said we didn't want long leases. We didn't want the selectmen to have that latitude. I think we wrapped the selectmen's knuckles on that because they thought it was a no-brainer and sensible, and they went ahead with it, and we said, oh no, we want to keep that authority to the RTM. Now all of a sudden, 2 years later, we come in with a 10-year lease, which is normal, with a 15-year extension, which is normal. So that gives us a chance to review it in 10 years, see if everything's going well, check back in, see if we still like everything the way it is, give us a chance to make some comments to our tenants on how we do things, and then renew the lease. But now we don't want to bother that. Give them 25 years, the heck with it. It's only a town asset of how many millions of dollars is that worth? We were worrying about a little piece of crummy dirt gravel patch on an industrial part of a river that some boat club had improved and made something of, and that was a big deal. Now you're talking about a whole asset. This is one of the gems of our town, and a town property, and a museum, and God bless the friends in the management of Bruce Museum. They've done a wonderful job with it. Nobody's denying that. And we're saying, oh, we'll just blow it right through. What the hell? It's much more convenient just to make it 25 years, and we won't have to talk to them again in 10 years. We saved ourselves a lot of time. You know, let's put a 3-minute rule on all leases, you know, and then every lease is 25 years, and we won't talk about it. And 2 years ago, we were examining every staple and every sentence and every period. But today, isn't it nice? Let's just be convenient and make it 25 years. I would vote no. Thank you.
All right, yes. Lucy Krasner, for what purpose do you rise?
To make a comment on this suggestion of 25.
All right, David Rudolph, District 8, you can get in the line.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Just to clarify, District 8 was at the LNR meeting, and District 8, as the representative there, I did vote against the extension to 25 years. Thank you very much.
Margaret Freiberg, District 7.
I'm also on the Legislative and Rules Committee, and I was also at that meeting, and to correct the record, I also voted against changing the term to 25 years. And I would like to ask the members here to think about the following. If in pursuant to a suggestion that was made earlier in connection with the food service at the schools, we were to enter into a contract to outsource the cafeterias to some independent party, would we enter into a contract for them to provide food services for 25 years? I don't think so. Even 15 years, unlikely. How many of you ever got a job where your employer gave you an employment contract for 15 or 25 years? This is not a lease, by the way, it's a services agreement. I would agree with those who say that BMI has so far done a very good job, but people move on, things change. Who knows what might happen in the future? And we would be entirely irresponsible to lock ourselves into a situation where, by virtue of having contracted for a 25 or even a 15-year agreement, we were unable to make a change if down the line it were to become desirable. I would also point out that the original agreement, which is to be extended here, is technically defective in that it has a section about default, and then it fails to define what constitutes an event of default. And there are also some ambiguities that would cause one to wonder whether even an outright breach of the contract, short of reaching the end of the 15 or the 25 years, would entitle the town to terminate. So I strongly suggest that we vote against the amendment to change this to 25 years. And in fact, I would support an upcoming amendment to limit it to 10 for the current time.
Further discussion on item 7. Lucy Krasner, District 5.
I think the Bruce Museum stands alone and separate from the types of things we have been discussing for leases in the past. I don't know how many of you go to the Bruce Museum regularly. There was an RTM special event at the Bruce recently, and there were not very many RTM members there. But if you go, you will see what a truly exceptional museum this is. And as they are seeking funds from donors to limit the time frame, I think, is a really bad idea. I think 25 years is an excellent proposal because donors who give, and there are many who give substantial amounts, will want to know that this museum is there, is growing, is really, it is a world-renowned museum at this point with exceptional exhibits, and I certainly support the proposal for the 25-year term.
Thank you. Glenn Canner, District 12. Glenn Canner.
Good evening. My name is Glenn Canner. I am from District 12, and I was the Legislative and Rules member that made the proposed amendment. I am the Legislative and Rules representative who proposed this amendment, and the reason was that we did learn a lot from the discussions on the leases, and the one thing that I was a bit troubled was when we would get proposals before Legislative and Rules, it wasn't really clear what the effect of the legal document was, and in looking at this, I fully recognize that there's a legitimate debate whether the extension should be 10 years or 25 years. But just to clarify what Mr. von Keyserling said, when I looked at this, it actually, what is on the table right now is the second sentence says, the management agreement shall be automatically extended provided that BMI is in compliance with the material obligations. Well, BMI has to be in material obligations at all times. So again, it's a legitimate debate whether or not it should be 10 years or 25, but I propose that, that we basically make this clear that really what we're saying, if we were to approve what is on the table right now, that we are effectively approving a 25-year extension because of the word automatic in there. So the purpose for the amendment was just to make it clear that we're talking about 25 years. Again, I understand that there's going to be an amendment for 10 years, but that's legitimate. I was just trying to clarify what the issue was. Thank you.
So you don't want us to delude ourselves into thinking that it was just 15?
Correct, right.
Right. Okay. Arlene Lamazzo, District 6.
I would urge you to vote for the 25-year number for the following reason. When I was new to town in the 60s, I had 4 children. I took them there regularly. The Bruce Museum was at that time a place where you could see a giant clamshell, you could see live monkey, and my children loved it because the monkey spit at them, and I think one other animal I've forgotten, and you had oodles and oodles of birds and ducks and whatever that was stuffed and preserved. Look where we've come to since the late 1960s. I would also add that Mr. Sutton recently told us at this event they've purchased 5 significantly important artworks. And though he didn't give us the figure, I'm going to assume that they're probably in the vicinity of $1 million. And that money doesn't come from us. It comes from donors. And if they're going to donate art, they want it to be on view, in hand, for a very long time. That's what you're voting on. Thank you.
Karen Fosiliotis, speaking on the Legislative and Rules motion to amend.
I just wanted to state that nobody is saying that the Bruce is not a fine institution, but somebody donating art can't expect that their art is going to be hanging there necessarily for the management terms, this is a management term. This has nothing to do with the operation, the internal operation of the Bruce. This is the management of the facility and of the grounds, okay? And whether it's 10 years or 25 years, it shouldn't influence potential donors as to whether or not they will be donating to the museum. So I would urge you to vote no for the 25 years.
Further discussion on the motion to amend? All right, will the district chairs please mark your voting cards. Legislative and Rules Committee motion to amend item 7 and proceed to poll your delegation. We will need, we will await the result of that vote before proceeding further. if you are in favor of changing the language of paragraph 6 of the management agreement to make it clear that the term will be 25 years from January of 2017, you should vote yes. If you want to leave it as is, you should vote no. After we have taken this vote, we will then take up the District 7 motion. So we could adopt this, we could adopt the motion to amend to make it clear, as Glenn Canner pointed out, what the term is and not have this automatic extension language, and then we could change it to whatever term we want. Do you understand? All right. Let me try and summarize what I understood the purpose of this motion to be. There is language in here that says the agreement will be extended for 15 years, but then includes an automatic extension, which our Legislative and Rules Committee is telling us could be interpreted to mean that this is in effect a 25-year extension. And that's what we should understand when we vote on the item as a whole, on the merits of the item. And that, to me, is really all that is being done here and might be a good idea. And then we can debate whether that 25 years is the right number. But in essence, it's get rid of this automatic extension language, I think, is the whole idea. Does everybody understand that? So if we did nothing, it could be 25 years anyway. And we have no discretion to end it before 25 years. There is an interpretation that that is what that means. So why don't we just put it in there and then decide on what the term should be? So if you are in favor of getting rid of this language about an automatic extension, excuse me, could you please take your seat? If you want to get rid of this language for an automatic extension, you should vote yes. And if you want to leave it in, you should vote no. And then after we have disposed of this, we'll take up the question of what should that number be. Yes. Well, I guess.
Are we extending the contract for 25 years? A yes or no vote?
This is a motion to amend. There is a provision in here for an extension for a term of years.
Who made that motion?
Please. So let's just leave it at this. Do you want to leave the language as is? Or do you want to make it clear that the term of the extension is 25 years? Okay? If you want to make it clear that it's 25 years, you should vote yes. If you want to leave the language as is, vote no. But understand it may have the same effect. Okay? That's it. No. I'm going to call for the vote at this point. If you want to have discussion and come up, but don't call questions from the floor. Mr. Meskers, do you want to say something? Stephen Meskers, District 6.
So just a simple question. There is no way to put this as a single vote to bed. So if whatever we vote here, we're going to be back up and voting on an amendment subsequent to that. Do I understand that?
District 7 has a motion, regardless of what happens with this vote, to make this a 10-year extension period. Is that correct?
Can we combine those issues into a 25 or 10 year?
Mr. Meskers. Is everybody clear on what we are voting on? Okay. Is there anyone who wants to try and, because I've tried to clarify what we're doing. It's clear to me, let's put it that way. But I understand some are not. Mr. Wells, where's Mr. Wells? Would you care to explain what a yes vote and a no vote means on your committee's motion?
I think Glenn Canner explained it best for the reason why he brought the motion that he did. And that is so the RTM would have their eyes wide open here. In reality, the way that this is drafted, this is not a 15-year term plus an extension. It's an automatic extension, which means for all intents and purposes, unless we amend it, it's going to be a 25-year term. We're just trying to make it clear to you, that's what you're voting on. It's a 25-year term because of the way that it's written.
All right. So will the district chairs please mark your voting cards? Legislative and Rules Committee motion to amend item number 7. And we will await the result of the vote, so if you would like to stand up and stretch, now would be the time. But before you do that, I do have the result of the vote on item number 4. Item number 4 was the $120,000 appropriation for the food service account. Those in favor, 140. Opposed, 24. Abstaining, 1. Item 4 has carried. All right, I have the result of the vote on the Legislative and Rules motion to amend item 7. Those in favor, 86. Opposed, 71. Abstaining, 5. That motion has carried. All right, continuing with item 7. Karen Fossiliotis, District 7.
District 7 took up item 7 on the call. As stated in the call, the Bruce Museum is seeking a First Amendment to the management agreement to take into account the proposed renovations that will be mostly covered by a grant from the state. By a vote of 12 to 1, the district voted to amend the term of First Amendment as follows. On page 3, number 6, we proposed that the amendment be the term little t of the management agreement shall be extended for an additional 10 years commencing on January 31, 2017 and ending midnight January 30, 2027. We also proposed changing the notice requirements under the agreement. Right now, the notices go to the Director of Parks and Recreation. We noticed that the first selectman would be signing this agreement. So we propose to change the notice requirements to add the office of the first selectman. So a new number 7 would be all notices sent and communications made under this agreement.
All right, so let's take them one at a time, okay?
That's fine.
All right, so your first motion is to amend what we just amended.
Correct.
And you will replace what is now 25 years to 10 years.
Right, commencing on January 31st, 2017 and ending midnight January 30th, 2027. And I can explain why we did that.
Well, hang on. And we'll then leave, provided that BMI is in compliance with all of its material obligations.
Well, I mean, it's a term, so they...
No, but it's a term that doesn't start until next year.
True, okay.
So you're going to leave that in there?
We'll leave that in there, yes.
Okay, so all you are doing is changing 25 to 10 and adding after January 31, 2017, you're putting the end date and ending midnight January 30.
Correct.
Okay, and everything else will remain in paragraph 6 as we just amended it.
Correct.
All right, that being offered on behalf of District 7, it does not require a second. All right, let me repeat what is now before us. This is a motion to amend paragraph 6 of the Bruce Museum Management Agreement. In the second line, what is in our second line now, now reads, shall be extended for an additional 25 years. That is being proposed to change to 10 years. And add after January 31, 2017, the following language, and ending midnight January 30, 2027, and then comma, provided that BMI, etc. That is what is now before us. Discussion on the District 7 motion to amend the term of the agreement. Karen Fossiliotis.
Okay. By a vote of 12 to 1, the district voted to amend the term of First Amendment from the 15-year with automatic 10-year extension to a flat 10-year term. One individual voted against changing the term of the agreement to 10 years, and that individual stated that she is happy to have the museum in town and did not see that changing the term would change anything that the town would do. The majority of our district felt that a 10-year term would be more sufficient to allow the proposed new Capitol renovation to be completed. Additionally, while it is agreed that the Bruce Museum has done a great job in the past with the oversight of the museum collection, concern was also voiced that a management agreement for 25 years is simply not something the town should commit to. After all, past performance does not necessarily predict future performance. Put another way, as an example, would a condominium association enter into a 25-year term with a management company to oversee its property? Probably not. The museum will be there, but the people running it may not. Circumstances can also change. A 10-year term would allow the RTM to review the management agreement within a reasonable time frame to determine whether future changes to the agreement are needed in the future. A 10-year time frame would also be long enough to satisfy the Bruce directors' expressed desire to send a message to potential donors that the town is committed to the Bruce. And, you know, as an aside, would a potential donor necessarily question what the terms of a management agreement is? Additionally, the notice provision in the original, and I'll talk about the notice provision later. So again, our vote was 12-1 for the 10-year
Thank
limit.
you. Further discussion on the District 7 motion to amend item 7. Peg Freiberg, District 7.
The vote on the previous motion was quite close, and I'm concerned that some of the people here may not have understood two very important things that we need to keep in mind when we're thinking about this. One is that regardless of whether it's BMI or anybody else who administers the museum, the building and the grounds on which it stands will belong to the town of Greenwich. The building will, by stipulation of the donor, Mr. Bruce, remain a museum, regardless of who we contract with to administer it. The art, which was acquired, will not go away along with any given administrator who may be replaced. The art belongs to the town and will continue to belong to the town. So the situation is analogous, if I may say, to a homeowner who contracts with a landscaping service and later decides to change landscapers. The lawn remains his, the trees remain his, the house remains his. The only thing that changes is who's doing the work. So in the event that someday it should happen that the town would become dissatisfied with the work that this particular contractor is doing, we should have the ability to replace them with a different contractor. Nothing else will change. We will still have the Bruce Museum. It will still operate. It's reasonable for us to go 10 years at a time.
Further discussion on the District 7 motion. David Detchen, District 10. Is the Bruce represented here tonight? Okay, we probably should hear from the Bruce.
We have in fact voted as a plurality to extend the term or define more clearly that the term is 25 years. I find that most of the analogies that have been expressed this evening are not apposite in this particular case. We are not renting a barn. We're not managing or selling the management of a concession stand at Todd's Point. And frankly, I think Mr. Sutton's argument is, to me at least, persuasive. Donors, whether they are donating money, cash for an expansion or whatever, or for donating works of art, frankly, looking forward, will want to see stability in the management of the museum, relying upon what has happened there in the past, seeing that as a fairly good indication of what's likely to happen in the future. And 10 years is a rather short window for that kind of window of stability in order to induce gifts. Thank you.
Thank you. Josh Brown, Chair of our Education Committee.
Mr. Moderator, I'll echo the comments by the previous speaker. I do also have a question to the presenter. Made a comment about the board of directors of the Bruce and that 10 years would satisfy their interest for a long term. I'd like to understand if that's in fact true and what conversation that came out.
All right. Do we have a response to that? Thank you. Ms. Fossiliotis?
The comment was made as a general comment saying that 10 years is, 10 years, 25 years, 10 years is a long period of time, and it should be considered a quote, stable environment.
All right, yes. Representatives of Bruce, would you like to introduce yourself?
My name is Suzanne Leo. I'm Associate Director of Development at the Bruce Museum. I've brought with me Patricia Chadwick. She is Treasurer and former Chair of the Board. The question before us with regard to the 10 or 25 years, I understand that the language existed as originally as 15 with an automatic renewal of 10. So henceforth, the 25 years, it was a simplification of language. With regard to accepting large funds from donors, incredibly valuable pieces of art, a question came up, would a donor ask whether or not we have a management agreement? And the answer is resoundingly yes. They need to feel very confident that there is a continuity in management of these items, whether they are outright donated or long-term loan. It's also beneficial to the Bruce Museum for other exhibitions. We do 12 to 14 exhibitions a year, many of which with borrowed pieces from other institutions. If they see that a management agreement is for a truncated amount of time, they will feel as though they are not lending to an organization that has a continuity of management, and that does tend to make things a little bit certainly difficult for us. I'm trying to remember if there were other questions that I could address or that Patricia and I can address.
Yeah, I'd like to make one particular point. I think it's very important to understand that the relationship that we have with the town and managing the museum is really not, while it's a contractual relationship, it's really not as though you're subletting this out to an entity. It's not like an accounting firm, or you can't go and say, ooh, we don't really think they're doing it very well. We'll just find another entity that we can make an agreement with. The Bruce Museum, Inc. is an organization that consists of nearly 50 employees, a board of directors, all attached to that entity, all basically, not all the employees, but basically all the directors being part and parcel of this town. So if there were some reason for being dissatisfied with whatever was going on between the management of the museum and the town, you can't really go and say, okay, we'll just put this out to bid, put out an RFP. There isn't another entity that can do that. So I think it's very important to realize that we are working hand in glove with you and for you. And this is a long, long-term relationship that has existed up to this point, and we fully expect it to last for much more than 25 years in the future.
Thank you. Further discussion on the motion to amend. Betsy Fruman, District 9.
My question to you is, why are we not rewarding excellence? We have no other entity in town as excellent as the Bruce. They have taken us from spitting monkeys to being able to accept valuable traveling exhibits. We should reward the excellence. And if someone comes in the future and says, but you gave the Bruce, you say, if you were the Bruce, we would give it to you too. I don't think there's any argument other than reward excellence.
All right. Ms. Vasiliotis, you've spoken. Further discussion on on the motion to amend item 7. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards? District 7, motion to amend term of management agreement in item 7. If you are in favor of changing 25 to 10, you should vote yes. If you want to leave it at 25, you should vote no. All right. We obviously will need to await the result of this vote before voting on item 7 on the merits. But if anyone desires to speak to item 7 generally on the merits, we can continue with that discussion. Is there anyone who would like to make further comments on item 7 generally? All right. Then we will await the result of the vote, the pending vote. Oh, you know what? Ms. Vasiliotis, you had another motion, correct? Okay. All right, Karen Vasiliotis with the second part of the District 7 motion to amend.
Okay, District 7 also noticed that the notice
All right,
provision...
hang on a minute.
I'm
Could
sorry.
everyone please give attention to the speaker? Go ahead.
Okay, District 7 also noticed that the notice provision in the original agreement had notices sent to the Parks and Recreation Department, and since the First Selectman is now signing this agreement, it was felt that the Office of the First Selectman was more appropriate place for the receipt of notice, since the Parks Department reports to the First Selectman, and we wanted to make sure that the First Selectman did get any notices that were sent. So again, we are proposing that in lieu of the current paragraph 7, it be amended to include all notices sent and communications made under this agreement shall be deemed satisfactorily if delivered by hand, with receipt obtained, or if sent by prepaid United States certified mail, return receipt requested. In the case of the town, to the Office of the First Selectman with the address, with a copy to the town attorney, and in the case of BMI, to Bruce Museum at their address, attention President. And then paragraph 7 and 8 would be renumbered as paragraphs 8 and 9 respectively.
All right. Is there any objection to this proposed amendment? No. All right, because we can adopt this motion to amend upon unanimous consent. Is there any objection? All right, that motion to amend, which adds a notice provision as paragraph 7, renumbering what is currently 7 and 8 to be 8 and 9, is adopted upon unanimous consent. Do you have that language, Ms. Budkins? All right, so we need that language. All right, so we are awaiting the result of the vote on the term, whether we will change 25 to 10. So why don't we expedite that voting? Okay. All right, we have the result of the vote on the motion to amend offered by District 7 to change the term of the agreement from 25 to 10. Those in favor, 59, opposed 94, abstaining 4. That motion has failed. All right. Item 7 on the merits as amended is now before us. Any further discussion on that? I ask the district chairs to please mark your voting cards, item number 7 as amended, and proceed to poll your delegation. Item 8 now comes before us. Peter Tessie, our selectman.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen of the RTM. Item number 8, resolved that the Preservation Restriction Agreement adopted by the Town of Greenwich, referred to as grantor, and in favor of the State of Connecticut, referred to as grantee, acting by the State Historical Preservation Office, an agency of the State of Connecticut, is hereby adopted.
Thank you. Will the member please move the adoption of the resolution? The resolution on item 8 has been moved and seconded. Mr. Berg, you want to start off with the report of the Land Use Committee?
Well, I'm thinking that we need to hear from legislative rules.
All right. Doug Wells, Chair of our Legislative and Rules Committee.
I'm not sure what you're expecting from me, Mr. Berg, on this one, but our committee looked at this matter last Monday evening, and while the committee could see that some of the changes had been made to the agreement that addressed the concerns that town representatives in the RTM had expressed when this came before us in March, Attorney McLaughlin explained that this draft is still being reviewed by SPHO, and he's uncertain whether future changes need to be made in order to satisfy both parties to the agreement. The committee felt that taking a vote on a document that might not be in final form was of little use to you, and therefore we chose not to take a vote on the matter, and we had hoped that the town and the SPHO could have presented a final document for consideration this evening, but that is not the case.
Thank you. Mr. Berg, with the land use report.
So what happened was that somebody came from Legislative and Rules and reported what you just heard from Mr. Wells, so we didn't take a vote on this either. I will remind you, though, that there was a committee that we authorized a committee to work on this. Michael Carter, who's vice chair of land use, served on that committee, so he was able to present the item and explain what has happened. And as Mr. Wells just explained to you, the committee is awaiting a decision by the state on the committee's proposed changes. So I think we were led to believe that this item might be withdrawn.
Well, it wasn't. It was presented to us. Andy Chapin, Chair of the Parks and Recreation Committee.
Okay. The Parks and Rec Committee reviewed this. We found that the terms as written were acceptable to the committee. There was concern that it was not in final form. There was some discussion among the committee about how we thought it looked like it represented a dialogue between the state, and that it was all working in the right directions, that the town's concerns were represented in the document we saw. Based on that, we proposed an amendment that we approve the resolution provided that the town attorney and the first selectman, in their judgment, determine that the final declaration from the state is acceptable. The vote was 6-3-1. Those in favor thought, we were working well, and everyone knew what we were aiming at, and all people's interests were aligned in the right direction. Those against felt simply we should not be voting on a document that's not in its final worded form. Districts 2 and 5 were absent. That's
All right, so do I understand your committee then is moving to amend this item?
We move to amend the item and that it's approved based upon, we approve the resolution provided that the town attorney and the first selectman, in their judgment, determine that the final declaration from the state is acceptable.
Well, that would be a motion to amend this resolution. That this resolution says that the RTM is adopting an agreement between the town and the state. And what I understand this motion to be, that we would not be adopting anything since there's not a final document, but we would be delegating the authority to
approve the final document.
To approve the final document to the first selectman and the town attorney.
Correct.
All right, let's hear the final report of our Public Works Committee. And I believe, does District 9 have a motion directed to this? Yes, okay. So we'll hear all those reports and then we'll decide what we're going to take up first. Arlene Lamazzo, Chair of the Public Works Committee.
Very simply, we voted 11-0-0 based on our appraisal of the document as presented to us. Thank you.
Okay. Betsy Fruman, Chair of District 9.
May I add a comment, please? I'm sorry, it was brought to my attention just now that our discussion did hinge on the fact that we assumed or hoped that the state would have replied, and that we were voting 11-0-0, assuming the state would reply. Thank you.
All right, Betsy Fruman, Chair of District 9.
District 9 moves to refer item 8 back to the special committee formed at the April 11, 2016 RTM meeting to discuss this preservation restrictions agreement. This special committee consisted of one member from each of the following committees: Legislative and Rules, Land Use, Parks and Recreation, and Public Works. This special committee will again discuss this item and report back to the RTM at our September 19, 2016 meeting.
All right, so we have two motions directed to this item, item 8. 1, delegates authority to enter into an agreement to the selectman and the first selectman and the town attorney based on their discretion. And this retains the final approval in the RTM and wants further work done. I suggest we take up the District 9 motion first. All right. So, Mr. Detchen? The question is, did the town hear from the state today? Does anyone know? Chris Franco? Sure. Answering that question.
Yes, I'm Chris Franco, and I'm the president of the Greenwich Point Conservancy, and I've been working with the special committee and with the state to work to finalize the terms of the preservation restriction document. And we actually heard from the state yesterday, on Sunday, and we have a revised draft that was distributed by me yesterday to the special committee. And the special committee, Kip Bergweger, as the chairman, distributed this afternoon to various parties. I couldn't tell you exactly who was on that distribution, but the.
All right, I think we need an answer though from someone representing the town's interest, Mr. Franco. Is there someone representing the town's interest who can tell us if there is a final agreement?
Is Kip here?
Is Mr. Bergweger here? Peter Tessie.
Based upon a non-response from our legal department, I'm taking that as we have not gotten a response, so therefore the answer is no.
Okay. All right. So that is the answer to Mr. Detchen's question. Ms. Fruman, if you could just formally make the motion, or all right. So why don't you just confirm District 9 is moving to refer item 8 back to the special committee formed at the April 11, 2016 RTM meeting to discuss this preservation restrictions agreement. This special committee consisted of 1 member from each of the following committees: Legislative and Rules, Land Use, Parks and Rec, and Public Works. This special committee will again discuss this item and report back to the RTM at our September 19, 2016 meeting. That being offered on behalf of one of our districts, it does not require a second and is now before us. Discussion on the District 9 motion to refer item 8 back to the special committee. Chris Franco.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and members of the RTM for the opportunity to come. I'd like to give some color on the timeline and sort of the background for how this occurred, because I do think it affects the question of the various motions that are before you all tonight. So if you would just indulge me for a few moments. I think many of you know the Greenwich Point Conservancy has been working down at Greenwich Point for 12 years now. We've been doing our work in collaboration with the town and with other groups in town, like the Shellfish Commission, the Bruce Museum, the Greenwich Historical Society, the Conservation Commission, the Friends of Greenwich Point, and a number of other organizations. And we've been very gratified to see how the communities come together and worked to make positive things happen at Greenwich Point over the last 10 years. The Greenwich Point Conservancy has been to the RTM 4 times in the last 12 years. The first 3 visits here were with respect to phases 1, 2, and 3 of work that we did at the Innisarden Cottage, and the work was done between 2005 and 2011. And we raised privately approximately $1.5 million, and then over the course of that 5 or 6 year period, we restored that building and worked with the town and with other organizations to create what's today a very dynamic facility that I think many in town use. The cottage was built in 1903, and it's been the recipient of multiple awards for excellence in historic reservation and preservation. And even though our work for the restoration of the cottage is done, the Greenwich Point Conservancy over the past 5 years and going forward has contributed substantial funds to the maintenance of the cottage and to work that's needed to be done there. The town is responsible for the maintenance, for the basic maintenance of the building, but when other types of things come up that need to be done, the Greenwich Point Conservancy typically, works with the town, and we fund and we orchestrate the work on those things. The fourth time that we came before the RTM was in 2012, in June of 2012, when we proposed a gift for the restoration of the old barn, which is what we're here discussing today. The old barn was built in 1887, and it's the oldest surviving building at Greenwich Point.
Yes, Mr. Wells.
I believe he was called to speak to the motion that's before.
Well, he is, but my understanding is he's telling us why he believes it's urgent that we act on this tonight. Is that essentially what you're telling
That
me?
is, I apologize if I'm being long-winded.
Know when it was built.
Go ahead.
Okay, well, I'll try to be brief. Back in 2012, we proposed and a gift was accepted for $850,000 to do the restoration work at the old barn. And after that time, and at the time, we had not raised the funds, and we represented to the RTM that we hadn't raised the funds, but that we would do so over time. And we began the planning of what the facility would look like and our plan for fundraising back in 2012 in June. Then in October, Hurricane Sandy visited Greenwich, as we all know, and Greenwich Point and the old barn were both hit very hard. And although the old barn sustained a lot of damage, some of the oldest and most historic parts still stand. The most significant impact to the Greenwich Point Conservancy, though, from Hurricane Sandy was that as a result of the storm, the FEMA regulations became much more stringent and tougher. And the process that we had to go through with the Planning and Zoning Commission was far more rigorous than I think anyone had anticipated or was even mandated prior to the new FEMA regulations. So we ended up being able to take advantage of the reason that it's important that the age of the building is because the work was permitted to be done based on a variance for historic buildings that was available at the time. So we were able to leave it in place, but we had to do certain things to make it more stormworthy. We ended up lifting the building, and we put 80 helical piles down under the foundation, under the deck, and those went down about 30 feet. They're basically giant corkscrews that go into the ground and support the building. And on top of that, we poured concrete grade beams. We put steel reinforcement in the building, and everything was anchored down with hurricane anchors. So it was a really very significant job, and it was tricky, but we got it done. Without doubt, the building is a much better building as a result of the process that we went through. And, I like to tell people that if Greenwich Point ever got washed out with a horrible storm, that the old barn and the deck, the Sue Baker Pavilion, will still be standing there in Greenwich Cove. Early in 2013, while we were still doing our fundraising for the old barn, but before we had started the project, we became aware of a grant opportunity for historic buildings, again, the relevance of it being a historic building, that were damaged in Hurricane Sandy. The funds were provided to states in the northeastern United States that were impacted, and the grant money was allocated from the department. It's federal funds that were allocated from the Department of the Interior, and in the case of the state of Connecticut, to be administered by the State Historic Preservation Office, SHPO. We started to work with the folks up in Hartford. They were very keen on our project, and they wanted to help us. They explained that the grant was a reimbursement grant and that we would first have to expend the funds and then we could get reimbursed as the project progressed. There was a big issue, however, and we at first didn't think that we would be eligible for the grant. And the issue was that as a condition, a preservation easement had to be put on the entire parcel that was the subject of the grant. And we told the SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Office, that we didn't think that we couldn't possibly qualify for that because the town of Greenwich Point is a beloved asset and it's a sensitive asset, and that our town would never agree to have SHPO or anybody else mandate what could or couldn't happen down at the point. So I would say maybe 2 or 3 weeks later, SHPO contacted us back, and that they said they had done their own work internally, and they would agree to the preservation easement, just applying to the exterior of the building and just applying to the actual building itself and the deck, the immediate area where the work was taking place, as opposed to the legal parcel. And that seemed like a breakthrough to us. So we contacted town officials who we had been working with, and we were able to obtain an authorization letter from the Selectman's office authorizing us to apply for the grant. And we got an agreement from the Department of Parks and Rec that the town was agreeable in principle to placing a preservation easement on the exterior of the old barn, subject to negotiation of terms and conditions that were acceptable to the town. So the state required us and the town to actually formally make those acknowledgements as part of the application process. And our attorney, with Ivy Barnum and O'Mara, took the documentation from the town and then made a certification to the state that the town was agreeable in principle, subject to negotiation of terms and conditions to placing a preservation easement on the building. So when all of these pieces came together, the Greenwich Point Conservancy was very pleased, because we hadn't at that point raised enough funds that we were comfortable moving forward. So with those additional funds, we made a determination as a board that we would move forward and start the project. So to be clear, the application was made in November of 2013. And then in the spring of 2014, our grant, I should note, was supported by not only many committees and commissions in town, but also by the Greenwich delegation of legislators, as well as Senator Blumenthal and Congressman Himes, who all came out strongly in favor of our grant. And these grants were from amounts as small as $2,000.
Mr. Franco, I think it's fair to say that we want you to get this grant. The question is, the devil's in the details, and are the details finalized? That's really all we're concerned about.
Well,
Mr. Detchen?
What are the adverse consequences to his organization of delaying the approval of this declaration
Till September.
to September?
Yes. That really is the issue.
Okay, all right, well, that's a very good question, and I'd like to address that. So in October of last year,
All right, he's going to answer, please. Let's pay respect to our speakers. Mr. Franco.
In October of last year, we were trying to get this preservation easement finalized, because it was the last and single item that needed to be done for us to get paid. So we had, for the last year, our organization been filing reports, doing all sorts of compliance things that you would expect that were associated with a $500,000 grant. There was one item that was left, which was the preservation easement. So to be clear, we've actually been working with the town since last fall trying to get this finalized. And in the meantime, we've been borrowing from Peter to pay Paul, and putting these bills to the side and paying these bills. So it's because the $500,000 we had expected to have received not this month, not last month, last fall. So we've been making do. So it's been a hardship. And if we have to wait until September or October and November, whenever this happens, it'll be an even worse hardship, because it impacts our ability to maintain buildings at Greenwich Point. It impacts our ability to really do all the things that we need to do. So it's not going to kill our organization. But the fact of the matter is, we didn't expect to be here at the RTM seeking to get this agreement authorized, because we believed at the time that the town was able to sign it. The town's, in fairness to everybody, I think, I'm not saying that anybody made a mistake, but turns out that the town attorney thought the correct thing to do was to refer it to the RTM. It was referred to the RTM this past spring. It was on the call for April. There were questions about whether, this would impact the town beach access policy, all sorts of legitimate and good questions. So we pulled the item in April. And then the RTM appointed a special committee. We've been working with the special committee. The special committee's been terrific, absolutely first rate and professional. And I wish I could say the same about the state. They have not been as proactive about getting it done, although, all of that said, I think they've gotten to the right place. So we have an agreement now that is essentially, it contains all of the substantive points that the town wanted. Yes?
Mr. Detchen?
Are you suggesting that this delay will affect your cash flow, or are you suggesting that the building restoration in fact costs more than $850,000?
No, I'm suggesting that it has and will continue to very negatively impact our cash flow. It is what it is. But so the longer that continues, that's continued pain for the Conservancy.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Von Keyserling?
Again, I'm confused. We had a grant that was anticipated, hasn't come through. They went ahead and built it in anticipation of this grant.
All right. Mr. Von Keyserling, what's your point of information? That's a question. What is your question?
No, actually.
Hang on. Excuse me. All right. Mr. Von Keyserling, come forward. You with a question.
Yes, I understand. Just a matter of process here. Following up with from District 10's gentleman, is the cash flow a problem because you had anticipated the grant and not getting the grant? You'd budgeted on the basis of the grant, and failing to get the grant or delaying the grant means that you have to go into other funds to carry it, and that's the damage to the cash flow? Thank you.
Yeah. I think, well, that is correct. It was a reimbursement grant, so when we had expended the first $500,000, we were entitled at that point to go and get reimbursement for that. We've spent...
All right, I think it's pretty clear. You're looking for this money, you'd like it sooner than later. All right. And we want you to get the money. We do. All right. Further discussion on the District 9 motion to refer. I'm sorry. Dean Gamanos, yes, Dean Gamanos, District 7.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I sit on the Parks and Recreation Committee. We heard the arguments pro and con. These folks have put a lot of time and effort into this, and several years now, and I think we owe them support on this project. It's a great project. It's a historic structure. Unfortunately, too many of the historic structures in our town are disappearing on us, so I strongly urge us to support giving them the money now, and I think with the amendment that...
So you recommend turning down this motion to refer?
Yes.
We're not giving them any money. We're just authorizing a grant from the state.
I'm not sure I understand that, Mr. Moderator.
The money involved is not coming from the town. It's coming from the state.
Correct.
Okay, that's all
I understand that. But
clarifying.
I think Andy Chapin's suggestion that we go along with it as long as the first selectman and...
Okay, so you are against this motion?
Yes,
Next.
I am.
Betsy Fruman, District 9.
District 9 presented this motion because we feel that it is the duty of the RTM to review restrictions put on us, our land, anything, review it, have our committees review it, have them come back to us and tell us what they think. This has not happened. And yes, there will be a delay, but I really don't want the RTM to give up their right to review this fully. Can we give it to the selectmen to do? Do we trust the selectmen? Yes, we do trust the selectmen, but I do think it is the RTM's job to do it. I strongly urge you to vote to refer.
Further discussion on the motion to refer. Don Conway, District 2. to be followed by David Detchen, District 10.
Please, folks, refer this thing back. First of all, you know the state of Connecticut. They don't like us, and most of the time, we don't like them. So, you don't know what's in that document. They didn't accept the changes that our committee made to it, and therefore, they didn't give our law department and our elected officials and ourselves a chance to look at what their changes are. So please don't do this. Refer it back and let's take a look at it. Please.
Thank you. Mr. Detchen, District 10.
We had an extensive discussion of this declaration, it's what it's called, in Parks and Rec. And we decided that it was appropriate for us to look at it substantively and to decide whether it was in order, and we voted 6-3-1 to do so. Frankly, all committees of the RTM had the same opportunity, and they had the same opportunity to vote for it. I've actually seen the changes that have been suggested by the state. We noticed when we discussed this declaration in the Parks and Rec meeting that various clauses had been added into the declaration, or at least were there from the very get-go, that protected the interest of the town. For example, there's a clause in there that provides that there should be access 12 days a year, and yet it's quite specifically states that that access is to be subject to the town's policies and procedures. So the declaration doesn't trump what our basic rules are for access to the town. I can understand why the town attorney would not be willing to jump up right now tonight and say that he's happy with everything, but quite frankly, I strongly suspect that when he gets done and the first selectmen get done, they're going to conclude that the changes that have been suggested are in fact not material and don't adversely affect in any material way the interests of the town. I think it's perfectly appropriate. You can view it as a philosophical question, but I think it's perfectly appropriate at this stage, having seen what in fact has been prepared and having seen the reaction of the state. From my personal point of view, there's enough there for me to conclude that there's nothing that the town attorney or first selectman is likely to go off the deep end in terms of reviewing. And I think it would be appropriate to allow them, in the course of time over the next weeks, to frankly approve this declaration and sign it before we come here in the September meeting, and so that the cash flow issues of the conferency can be addressed.
Thank you. Kip Bergweger, District 8.
Mr. Moderator, members of the RTM, I'm Kip Bergweger. I'm the chair of the special committee. I have had an opportunity to run a computer program comparing the most recent version of the proposed agreement with the changes that the document that appears in the call. And of all the changes that the town requested that the state make, all but one of them has been incorporated. So it's not, most all of our changes have been accepted, but there are some additional language that the state has inserted, which I personally don't think has a substantive effect. These changes came so late that I have distributed a marked version showing the changes, but I don't think anybody has had much of a chance to really look at those. But I just want to clarify that it's not like the state has rejected everything. It has accepted most everything, except they still want us, if they sue us, to pay attorney's fees even if they lose, and which we think is a little unreasonable.
Okay. Wayne Fox, our town attorney.
Good evening, and I will be brief. Just so that there is no one else speaking for the law department other than me, I do want to make it clear that there have been proposals submitted to the state. I am just learning this evening, courtesy of Peter, that those have not been accepted. As of 3:30 this afternoon, that was not clear, but there are substantive changes in this document that have not been reviewed by the appropriate committees. I don't set policy, you do, but there are issues that the committees may want to take a look at it before there's a final vote. And the statute makes it very clear that this kind of document has to be adopted and approved by the RTM. So there's a delegation of authority that you may not be comfortable with.
All right. Are you saying, Mr. Fox, that a delegation of authority is not in legal order?
In light of the fact that the statute that is applicable, which talks about an easement, which talks about a declaration of this kind, it says very clearly, this is not a subjective concept. It says very clearly in the applicable statutes that it has to be adopted by the RTM. So it is my opinion that that kind of delegation to the town attorney and to the Board of Selectmen is of questionable validity.
Okay. Well, I think that answers the question. All right. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards? District 9, motion to refer item 8 back to the special committee. If you are in favor, you vote yes. If you are opposed, you vote no. We'll need to await the result of this vote before proceeding further. All right, we're tallying that. This is going to carry. I'll officially announce the vote when it's called, when it's compiled. But let's continue. The next item is item 11. May we have the resolution on that item? Peter Tessie, our selectman.
Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen of the RTM, resolve that the following named person nominated by the Board of Selectmen be reappointed a member of the Planning and Zoning Commission for a term expiring 3/31/19. Margarita T. Albin.
Thank you. Will a member please move the adoption of the resolution? Resolution on item 11 has been moved and seconded. Peter Berg with the report of the Land Use Committee.
So the Land Use Committee interviewed Margarita Albin last Monday evening, and I'll be brief. There was no objection to Ms. Albin. I could tell you about her. I could tell you what some of the things she said. Our vote on Ms. Albin was 10-0-0 with District 4 and 5 absent.
Thank you. John Eddy with the report of the Appointments Committee.
I could also fill a lot of time by saying wonderful things about Margarita Albin and the Appointments Committee's interview with her. Our vote was 11-0-0 with District 2 absent.
Thank you. Discussion on item 11. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards, item 11, and proceed to poll your delegation. I have the result of the vote on the motion to refer item 8 back to the special committee. Those in favor, 130, opposed 20, abstaining 1. That motion to refer has carried. Item 12 now comes before us. Mr. Tessie.
Item number 12, resolve that the following named person nominated by the Board of Selectmen be appointed an alternate member of the Planning and Zoning Commission for a term expiring 3/31/17. Victoria Goss.
Thank you. Will a member please move the adoption of the resolution? Resolution on item 12 has been moved and seconded. Peter Berg.
So as Mr. Tessie just said, Victoria Goss will be an alternate member of the Planning and Zoning Commission. She is a lawyer. She does primarily matrimonial work. She once worked for Renee Ansamo of Penn AmSat. She did have some planning experience in New Canaan some years ago. She's lived in Greenwich for 24 years. Our vote on Victoria Goss was 10-0-0, Districts 4 and 5 absent.
Thank you. Mr. Eddy with the report of the Appointments Committee.
The Appointments Committee met with Ms. Goss on May 24th and found her to be very experienced in law, general law, including zoning. The only issue that perhaps we had with her when asked about her vision for the town in the context of her role on the Planning and Zoning Board of Appeals, Ms. Goss emphasized the importance of having a town which attracts and supports people, but she was unwilling to make any statements that she felt might lock her into a position that she could not support in the future. So we were unable to get a good idea of what her vision was for the town. The committee voted to recommend 8, 0, and 2 with 1 and 2 absence. The delegates from District 6 and District 10, their abstentions indicated that their votes reflected their desire to see a more fully informed, clear vision for the town. Thank you.
Thank you. Discussion on item 12. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards, item number 12, and proceed to poll your delegation. All right, the remaining 3 items, am I correct that it is the consensus to postpone these? All right. Formally, we need them before us. Mr. Tessie, could you just offer all 3 for us,
Sure.
please?
Item number 17, resolve that the following named person nominated by the Board of Selectmen be appointed an alternate member of the Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Agency for a term expiring 3/31/20. Item 19, resolve that the following named person nominated by the Board of Selectmen be appointed a member of the Board of Parks and Rec for a term expiring 3/31/19. Frank DiVincenzo. Item 20, resolve that the following named person be nominated by the Board of Selectmen be appointed an alternate member of the Harbor Management Commission for a term expiring 3/31/19. Donald R. Carlson.
Thank you.
And I believe the first one, I don't know if I said it, was Klaus H. Yonder, number 17.
Thank you. Will the member please move the adoption of items 17, 19, and 20? The resolutions on items 17, 19, and 20 have been moved and seconded and are now before us. May we have a motion to postpone offered by some committee here?
On item number 17, the appointment of Mr. Klaus Yonder as an alternate member to the Inland Wetlands and Watercourses.
No, we don't need the
Okay.
report. Just a motion to postpone.
Yeah.
All 3 items
I make a motion to postpone all 3 items indicated
to the September meeting.
to the September meeting.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there a second? All right, is there any objection? All right, that motion to postpone items 17, 19, and 20 can be adopted upon unanimous consent. That being the final business to come before us, we will need to await the resolution of the pending votes before proceeding to adjourn. I have the result of the vote on item 11, the appointment of Margarita Albin to be a member of Planning and Zoning. Those in favor, 127. Opposed, 2. Abstaining, 0. That item is carried. All right, I have the result of the vote on item 12. This is the appointment of Victoria Goss to be an alternate member of Planning and Zoning. Those in favor, 107. Opposed, 14. Abstaining, 7. That item has carried. There being no further business to come before the meeting and absent objection, this meeting stands adjourned upon unanimous consent. Thank you all for coming. Have a safe trip home.